Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. We're getting back into the old organized crime field of study here again.
Organized crime class is back on. This time we're going abroad. We're going international. We gave you the American Mafia and the Castellammarese War and kind of how everything got started in the United States. We decided that it was time to go international and to go after the Yakuza.
These guys make the mob look kind of tame.
And not only tame, but the sheer numbers that we'll get into to talk about what they were at their peak.
Not only that, but so the numbers in comparison to what the American Mafia numbers would be, but you just shrink the land in.
Half. It's like half the population.
Yeah.
And it's like 6 times the amount of gangsters.
Gangsters per capita, per square mile.
On a small island, too. We're not talking
That's what I'm talking about. You shrink it down and in insanely condensed landmass.
These guys, I think, were certainly more disciplined gangsters as well. There was not a lot of emotion, I think, behind what they do.
It was a business.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say that. Okay, it was run like a business, but it was structured like a family.
But at the same time, there was that cold calculation of a business.
Yes.
We weren't just being angry about stuff and running in and popping somebody in the head and running out. And
a lot of accountability, like punishment of yourself and everything like that. We're going to cover it all.
It's very weird to say that there's honor among gangsters, but I think this is pretty honor driven.
As far as honor among thieves?
Yeah.
This would be the OG honor because you're dating it all the way back. I mean, these guys try to, tie themselves back to the samurai.
Samurai, Ronin.
Yeah.
Anything that they can. And when we kind of snuff out here in the beginning what they actually came from, stuff starts to make a lot more sense.
Yeah. You start to actually see this is the story they want you to believe, but this is actually probably more likely of how it actually came about.
Yeah.
Remember, guys, rate, review, subscribe. 5 stars wherever you guys are listening to your podcast. We do have the YouTube up and running. Doesn't have a video component yet, but I'm not going to sit here and judge anybody for how they want to listen to their podcast. You want to use YouTube? Go ahead, have at it.
Absolutely.
Because we're there for you. You got anything else?
No. Let's get on the crotch rocket.
There we go. I feel like I missed a golden opportunity for a Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift reference. That involves the Yakuza.
I waited for the second.
I understand that you wouldn't remember that aspect of it because of the drifting and everything. That's what you remember most.
I never saw it. I felt like it was a ripoff from the Straight Line because Too Fast, Too Furious should have been 3 Fast, 3 Furious, right?
No,
Tokyo Drift came out second.
No.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. The timeline is sketchy for the Fast and the Furious franchise. I don't want to disappoint anyone this early on, but I don't know if that's going to be something in which we need to do a history of.
Eventually, once they get to Fast and the Furious 12, which should be like next year at this point.
It might already have been there.
I think they've done at least. They've been to space.
Yeah, they have been to space.
They brought Michelle Rodriguez back.
You know who we didn't find out went to space? We don't know if any of the Yakuza went to space. So
they had enough money to. They had enough money to.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of theories around the actual kind of origins of the Yakuza. Some of them are pushed more so for the, I guess, traditional aspect of it. So kind of some of the main theories with how they came about is you have the samurai theory. And this was essentially when Japan went over to the shogunate. You had all of these samurai who were ronin, so samurai without a master. They were loyal to the shogun. They were basically mercenaries and like this enforcement. Think kind of like Gestapo. That's kind of how they would be.
And we covered this in the samurai episode, but this is just sort of a rollback.
You then had the guys that were kind of the anti-Ronin that were fighting against the shogunate, and they were known as, and they all have names that, of course, we are going to butcher throughout this podcast. So, descended from the Ronin, who terrorized the people loyal to the shogun, were the Kabuki Mono. You then had the Machiyako, who were the enemies of the Kabuki. They were the protectors of the people. These were the guys that were just like the farmers that are gathering up and raising arms to protect us from the savage Ronin. Then you kind of move into a different type of field during the Edo period is kind of where this all dates back to. So 1603 to 1868, I think, is what they consider the Edo period.
17th century through 19th century.
Yeah.
The dates are always going to be a little fuzzy because we're talking about the 1600s.
Yep. So those are the two badass ones that you want to kind of tie your, hitch your wagon to. We now come to the, is it the Tekiya?
Yeah, Tekiya. This is, I hang my hat on the Tekiya being...
I think it's both. I think it's a combination of these two groups that we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
so you basically had Tekiya, who, they were just hustlers. Basically, these guys were the ones that started kind of a black market, actually, is kind of what they would be dealing with, right?
I would say that the Tekiya, not to cross over because I know Japanese and Chinese relations aren't real great, this was like the Chinatown vendor market of Japan.
Okay.
These guys were selling secondhand goods.
Stolen goods
that were very cheap. Yeah, secondhand goods, hot goods, anything that they could get their hands on. And at certain points in time, like, there were stories of them just acting like they were about to pass out from some sort of drug or alcohol.
Yeah, they'd be going to sell something and be acting drunk or something like that. So people would think they would be like taking advantage of them and getting like a good deal.
Yeah.
But it was essentially snake oil salesmen.
They'd go home, the tin toy would fall apart, and they'd say, you got me.
And you'd go back and the stall wouldn't be there the next day. They'd be in another section.
The whole thing is so kind of... it's like a farmer's market of thievery almost.
Yes.
Like, these guys would show up at the Shinto festivals. They would control the stalls there. They kind of grew into an organization to where they were almost the organizers. And being the organizers, if you had other vendors that were showing up to want a stall and they wanted the stall on Main Street, it was always a little easier to pay the Tekiya a little off the top to get a better stall.
I'm going to use a lot of references as far as impressions with the Italian mob. So I just see that being like, we got a stall over here. It's kind of back behind these other stalls, but we got one right up front if you have a little bit of extra.
And we'll make sure there's no other meatball salesmen around you.
Exactly.
Our security will make sure that there's no other vendors that are selling the same goods as you can if you grease our palms a little bit.
So the Tekiya are considered kind of one of the lowest social classes in Japan. We have another one that's kind of coming up right with them on that same level of social classes in the Bakuto. And the Bakuto were basically involved and participated in kind of the gambling, betting, more of that kind of side of things.
They said that the Bakuto were actually looked at lower than like farmers because at least farmers had land.
Yeah. And they were contributing in some way instead of just actually taking money from people.
Well, and the funny thing is the Bakuto kind of were contributing to the government because they would run these gambling dens that were very popular and still quote unquote illegal at the time. But what the government did they would go to these Bakuto houses and they would say, hey, set up along these routes. We just paid all of these workers, all of these construction workers or anything like that. We'll go ahead and basically sanction what you're doing, but you're going to have to kick us back half that money that you're collecting because we want to get some of the money back that we just paid our own workers.
So we have these public works projects that we're building. We're building an overpass. If you could do me a favor and just kind of set up on each side of the overpass, these gambling dens, that way, once they collect their paycheck, they can just come straight to you guys. You'll keep some, you'll kick some back to us. It's win-win. Except for the people actually doing the work.
Yeah, and then you can also kind of serve as a loan shark with crazy amounts of interest that you're charging these people. And if you just want to show up with a hired enforcer a day or two afterwards and start demanding payment immediately, you can kind of do what you want. There's a lot of Yakuza tricks that we're going to talk about later on that feel very reminiscent of the Bakudo. It's kind of like they took the best of both worlds, and we will see the Tekia and the Bakudo coming together, but it's almost like they took the Tekia structure and then they took the Bakudo tricks.
And then they took the look of the samurai.
Yeah.
Because
for a while.
With the swords and everything
until
like
Hollywood got there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the thing, too, is at a certain point, the only people that were allowed to carry swords were actually recognized samurai. So you have the Tekia and the Bakudo, who are kind of two sides of the same coin, basically. The Bakudo are setting up in like abandoned temples and shrines, like all over Japan. And like you said, loan sharking was common because, of course, the people need to keep spending their money. And then also they were running some protection rackets just like the Tekia were. Eventually, the government formally recognizes the Tekia as like a class. So I guess social classes had, some of them were not recognized by the government. I don't know what that entails, like representation or something. But once they actually get recognized as a class, this is where we kind of see the introduction of this structure. And it becomes highly structured pretty quickly, with the seat of the head of the table essentially being the Oyabon, or the boss. You would then have Koban, which were the members. Mm-hmm. And it operated in much the same way that the family dynamic in Japan is, where the head of the household is the man. He makes all the decisions, even in fact, what his kids' professions are going to be, who they're going to marry, all of this shit. The Oyabon was essentially this foster father, and the Koban were all of his children.
Male children.
Yes. Male children, obviously. But when this occurred and this structure started to come into place, the Oyabon achieved basically near samurai status at that time. They were able to, at that point, have a surname, and they were also able to carry around the two swords that were traditionally only to be carried by the samurai.
Which is wild that we're giving these guys weapons.
Yeah. Not only that, but you're basically saying that the people that are in charge of these things that, kind of prey on vice, or more of the darker, like illicit side of society, you've now put them on par with what normally people see as the pinnacle of honor and chivalry. You're saying they're the same. You're already setting that.
Every Shinto festival that you go to, every religious festival that you go to, will kind of be run by these Tekia as far as the sales side of things. Mm-hmm. So you're putting them in charge of government-sanctioned religious festivals, which seems to be kind of a bad idea. We actually get the name the Yakuza from the Bakudo, which I thought was pretty cool. The name Yakuza is said to have kind of originated from this card game. It was called Oichio Kabu, I believe. And the goal was you're dealt 3 cards. The goal is to count those numbers on those cards up to 9, which is your best hand. Don't know how in the hell 9 is your best hand. But
it's because you only take the last number. You're trying to get the highest number, and if you go over 9, then it goes back down, and you start, and now you're taking that second number.
You're taking the second number off of a double digit.
Correct. So 9 being the best hand out of those 3 cards. So anything getting you above that, a 19 is going to be on par with a 9. But anything other than that is not going to be the 9.
Unless you get a 3, or your cards need to total 20. 20 is your worst hand.
Or 10. Both are 0.
Yeah, I thought they said that 20 was the worst score that you could possibly get.
It was because it's further away from the legitimate 9, I think, is what, yeah.
Like you were almost there, but then you were so far away.
You were as far away from 9 as you actually could be.
The worst 3 cards that you could get were considered an 8, a 9, and a 3. In Japanese, it's a cut down version of what they would say for 8 is ya. A 9 would be considered ku, and 3 is za. So Yakuza is basically the most undesirable hand that you can get.
It's a waste.
And that is sort of where this name springs from, which I think the Yakuza don't call themselves the Yakuza. This is more of what the name that was given to them was. They believed that they were chivalrous human beings. They believed that
mission statements can be misleading, but yeah, and I mean these guys will eventually kind of more refer to themselves as the Yakuza is more of like a job title. It's not what they are. It's the job title is what it is. But you're working for a company, or you're working for a clan or a syndicate or what have you.
So there's going to be a million different titles: gang, syndicate, clan. All of these different things are just going to be basically like something that's under the Yakuza banner.
Yeah.
Yakuza can be one person, it can be an entire grouping of people, but it's just the gangs under that title. And kind of the first guy to start this whole thing, his name was Shimizu Jirocho. Jirocho. He was adopted into a Bakudo family. He would rise to prominence during his life in the 19th century. He would end up controlling the port of Shimizu that connected the two former capitals of Kyoto and Edo. So if you connect the port that's sitting right in the middle of the two former capitals, anything that's coming in from any other area, if you run protection for those guys, you kind of control the flow of goods that are going into the two former capitals. So the two most populous areas, basically. He's kind of the first folk hero of the Yakuza. Within that kind of idea and the structure that Chris was talking about, the Koban basically pledged all of their allegiances to the Oyaban.
That was your family. You were breaking from your biological family. In fact, I want to say, and I don't know because, again, they're broken up into different syndicates and everything. So, of course, they're going to have differing rules. But there's this overarching kind of set of like a code. One of the things was the even if your wife and children are to starve or something, your loyalty first and foremost and priority is the Yakuza.
Make sure the Oyaban eats.
Yep.
There's ceremonial, kind of like how you would get in. There's a ceremonial sharing of sake, which seems pretty on the nose. It's a part of their initiation rituals, and basically the sake cup would be filled. The Oyaban would take a drink. He would pass it off to the Koban. He would have a drink, and they would just sort of share in this tea ceremony that is like something that's just very normal, but when you put it in the parameters of an organized crime syndicate to bring them in together, kind of makes it more special.
Yeah, it has a lot of similarities with like a Shinto wedding, they said, and I'm going to
Like a frat.
Kind of, but like, isn't Shintoism kind of and Bushido, aren't they kind of close? Like a shared belief system?
The Bushido code was the honor code for the samurai, whereas Shintoism is like the full-blown, I believe it's the religion of Japan.
Okay.
And it's still practiced pretty well. It's it's polytheistic. It's kind of like the gods of nature and animals. That's why...
the shit I could get on board with. Okay.
Yeah, when we start talking about like representations in artwork on skin, there's a lot of like Shinto beings that get used, like a koi fish or
like
dragons.
Mythical, like, figures and everything.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Greek gods. So, yeah, so with the initiation, Oyaban drinks, and then I think when he passes it to you, you finish it. And then that's what kind of then seals the deal. They then wrap the cup in paper and give that to you, and that's like the symbol that, hey, this thing has been finalized. You don't get a watch or anything yet.
It's like when you go to Margaritaville and you drink the margarita and they give you the glass afterwards.
Exactly.
It's you and Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this whole kind of just the way that it all works, these new members, you start in the bottom ranks. You are refilling tea at different parties. You're a gopher. You're basically on call 24/7 for any of the older brothers. You're probably not working for the Oyaban yet because they just don't trust you at that point.
Oh, yeah. You're in the same way that like motorcycle gangs have prospects.
Yeah.
Where you're the lowest rung, you're having to do all of the fucking bitch work is basically what you're doing to prove yourself for a period of time.
Two ways to fast track yourself up to being what they would consider a made man is either taking a life or handling a prison sentence for another higher ranking member.
Taking life in the name of the Yakuza or the,
yes.
the Oyaban.
Basically, their thought process is if you want to be a devoted Yakuza member, you either need to be okay with giving your life or taking a life. That feels pretty blood in, blood out. Like, if you don't do what we want you to, we're going to kill you or beat the hell out of you.
You did get a nice ceremony, like, as you were getting out of prison.
Yeah, and that was always what it was. And that kind of leads into this handling a prison sentence for another member. Somebody that's already a made man, somebody that can't benefit from doing time and getting that respect.
I can't go in there. Look at me.
You can step in and go talk to the police, and you can basically take the rap for somebody else. You go in, serve a laughable amount of time for murder and other pretty serious crimes.
Which is not, I mean, as far as prison sentence, sentences go is not bad because you're also in there where this organization also has power.
Yeah.
And so you are on the hierarchy as far as prison goes. You're coming in at the top.
You're going to a place where the guards fear you out of respect for the organization and what it can do.
Yeah.
Like it's a very interesting dynamic.
Which is so ironic because the whole persona and what they, produce or try to put out there to the public is no. We're no different. We're still that group. We're still that group of the fucking missed the name again.
Taki and Bakudo.
Oh no, they don't want to be associated with that.
Oh.
That's what they actually came from. No. We're the Machu-Yako. We're the ones that defended the people against those Ronin and against the Shogun and everything. That's who we are. We don't harm the citizens. We don't do that. We're still that chivalrous, honorable. We're just doing it a little differently. Through gambling and horse.
Well, and the Yakuza honor code is something that they stick to pretty strongly as far as what it is. It's kind of this 5-point plan, 5 points of what they would have to do.
5-point plan, 5 days, one plan a day. Company solved.
Treat your Oyaban with respect. That's
of course.
Definitely clearly number 1. Number 2, don't steal from the everyday man. You don't harm the public. Now, harming the public has a lot of different meanings, I guess, because you can financially harm them or physically harm them. We don't want you to physically harm them.
It's also someone's perception. Did that hurt the public? Did it?
Number 3, and this one ranks pretty highly as number 3 coming in there, so I feel like it probably caused some problems. Do not disrupt the harmony of the gang or touch another partner of a fellow member. So whatever you do, don't have sex with somebody's wife in the gang.
Yeah.
Which begs the question, as we were kind of talking about in the warm-up before the episode, every rule has to have come from an issue.
Yeah, okay, so rule number 1, obviously made up by the Oyaban.
Yeah.
Hey, respect the Oyaban. That's really the only rule I have right now. Then all of a sudden, someone cut off a citizen's hand, a common man's hand, because they were stealing from him. They're like, fuck, can't be doing that. Okay, number 2 rule, write it on the board, where, do not hurt the people. All of a sudden, fight breaks out. Oyaban comes out. He's like, what the hell's going on? He's like, he fucked my wife. All of a sudden, it starts to tear the clan apart because you got half the clan in support of this lieutenant, half the clan in support of this lieutenant. He's like, geez, 3rd rule, no one fucks anyone else's wives.
Yeah, and it really depends on who was doing the banging on the hierarchy. Because if the Oyaban bangs your wife, you're probably not going to say anything. There's going to be no real issue there because who do you bring the problem to?
If it's low Koban on Koban action, you're probably just fucking settle it. Squash it. If it's your kind of mid-tier or the guys that are right under you, you can't have that happening. You got to have harmony there.
You gotta come up with that rule. Number 4, also a very laughable rule that I don't even know why they even kept it in there, but never involve yourself with drugs. We're going to be talking a lot about drug transport and drug imports and exports and drug sales throughout this entire episode, but it kind of takes a little bit, and there is an impetus for them to move into drug sales.
Yeah, I think the point is at that point, if you're looking at probably what the drugs were, probably opium, right? Or something kind of related to that. They see what it does to people. That's simply a rule to protect your business of saying, I don't want you guys fucking on opium while you're trying to represent this and take care of my business.
10 crack commandments. You don't get high on your
someone
own
came
supply.
in and fucked something up because they were high. And so he's like, rule number 4, you guys can't fucking do drugs.
Rule number 5, and this word's going to get real fucking old during this whole episode. Always act chivalrously. I self-report here. Chivalry is a word that I kind of have a loose understanding of as far as do good things and always be respectful and always do the right thing.
Chivalry, I think, is kind of there's a weird gentlemanly aspect of it, of a combination of a gentleman and someone who sticks up for the weak. Because chivalry essentially is the thing that you always hear women say, oh, chivalry is dead. No, it's not. It's still fucking around.
Less.
Well, I was going to say, raise your fucking standards then.
Yeah.
They're out there. You're listening to them right now. No, but I also think that because of the whole aspect with chivalry being related to the medieval knights, there was that point about the knights were supposed to protect the people. So I think that's how it kind of has the dual meaning, at least for me.
Chivalry, noble, kind of the same.
See, but then
Two
you're
sides of
talking
the same
about
coin.
noble, and noble has a completely different meaning if you're like, are you noble or a noble? Because nobles fucking suck.
Yeah, bad guys.
Yeah.
No, being noble though, not too bad.
Yeah.
So the hierarchy and the structure that they kind of go through as far as the chain of command, there's so much of this senpai kohai, this junior and senior among just, the regular members.
This is a Japanese culture thing about this father-son relationship, even to the point, have you heard the thing where corporations will actually adopt these executives that are working for them to keep them within and keep the company a family business?
I can see that from two different angles, and one of them is very noble, and the other one is like slavery.
Yeah, it is very
you don't go
self-serving.
against the family.
You're adopting a 45-year-old dude. I mean, I don't know what you're getting at here.
You're doing it half to try to kind of keep up this image, and then have to make sure like he can't quit the company and go work for somebody else because
Exactly.
it would be like him disrespecting the family.
Fucking tied.
You have the kumicho, which is basically the oyaban. It's just a different title for it. He's going to be the head of the power structure. Under that, I'm going to let Chris handle this one because it's a fun word, but it's a tough word.
He's going to let me. He wants me to butcher the shit out of this. Okay. Kumichu Oyaban. And we're probably not, this is the only time we're really going to use these titles.
Yeah.
We're going to use what we kind of know them as. So it's the Wakagashira.
Nailed it.
Nice, thanks. This is your second in command. Now, this is where stuff kind of gets confusing, so try to stay with me here. It's early on in the episode. When you have this father-son relationship, anyone under the father is a son. Within the sons, those are brothers, but you have your younger brother and you have your elder brother. But it's not based on your age, it's based on your tenure within the Yakuza, or like your station. So you could have a 45-year-old younger brother and a 25-year-old older brother, depending on when they actually entered in.
It's kind of like living in the South.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So, the Wakagashira, the second in command, he is the eldest son of the Oyaban. And by that, he is the longest tenured, basically, person that's under the Oyaban. You then have the Shatagashira. I feel like I'm using a different accent to actually say a Japanese word, so it's not sounding correct to me. He is the oldest younger brother of the Oyaban. So he is the most tenured, but on the same kind of level, like they came up together, of the Oyaban. You then have the Honbuko, is the GM, general manager. You have the Fuko Komiko, or Komicho, who is the deputy Oyaban. So I don't know how this structure, like power controller, what it is. And then you have the, God, I'm going to destroy this
Shikokobu.
one. The Jimo Koyokucho. Oh, God, that was horrible. That's the Secretary General. Now, three of these roles, the Waka, the Shate, and the Hombuko, or Hombucho, make up the, I'm going to let you say this one. Is Shikobu? The executive office.
Okay.
Yeah, the Shikobu, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the executive office. That's essentially your board of directors, I guess, for a company. And the three that I just listed off, they're the ones that actually make up the executive office. You then have some other roles that are underneath that, but this is actually the kind of the structure. I think I want to say, like, as of 2024, this is the Yamaguchi Gumi's structure, and the Yamaguchi Gumi is the largest of all of the Yakuza syndicates.
Yeah, top dog syndicate. Most membership. Probably the ones they actually just had a
Census.
weird. It was like a split. There was a schism within the family.
So there's two Gumis now.
Yeah, and one of them is the Kobe Yamaguchi Gumi, and the other one's just the Yamaguchi Gumi. Kind of getting back into our timeline a little bit. After you have the Shogunate era, you see kind of a pushback into an older style that's kind of getting away from this feudal system. It was the Meiji period. I believe it was called the Meiji Restoration.
Still an emperor during this time frame, even during the Shogunate. I feel like so the Shogunate, kind of comparing it, would have been kind of like Mussolini running Italy while there's still actually a king, right?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking it as like the monarchy in Britain.
Okay.
Like it was a king in name only, really. They had no power. It was just a placeholder.
It was the person below them that was actually functioning as the head of government.
Was the Shogunate.
Yeah.
So during this Meiji Restoration that happened from 1868 to 1912, the feudal system is abandoned, so we lose out on the daimyo holding all of this land. The peasantry is still going to be the peasantry, but at the same time, they'll be released from their feudal bonds.
Yeah, but you don't get to be called peasants anymore. Now you just get to be a different class that's right on the peasant class. You just get a fancy new name. And you got to, like, even if your life is not improving a lot more, with that system keeping everyone down, you got to just be happy that there's a change coming on.
Absolutely. No matter where it kind of ends up, that's where it ends up. The Yakuza go ahead and kind of follow this modernization. They grow their businesses and diversify into things like running construction companies, running the docks, skimming off the top of both while they're doing it, because it's pretty easy to add 10% to a construction bill and just go ahead and pocket that 10%. If you're running protection for dock workers and protecting these companies that are shipping in, because we're in the 20th century now, getting to it, where there is the opening up to more of an international market that's happening in Japan. So if you can control imports, you're probably going to be running a pretty good racket.
So that's what essentially what was it called? The Meiji?
The leaders.
Yeah, it was the resurgence, essentially what it was. So with that came kind of this industrialization of Japan to kind of bring it up for a more modern time. And then also there was this push to kind of open up international trade. Whereas previously within the shogunate, it had been very just like, no, we are isolated. We're not doing that stuff. And so this is going to upset, a large amount of these, traditionalists and everything that actually maybe agreed with how the shogunate was running.
Wasn't it Matthew Perry? Not R.I.P. Matthew. Well, they're both dead now. But wasn't his name Matthew Perry that came over on the dual
steamboat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And made the first United States connection to the islands. Another thing that is so big in the Yakuza culture, and it's actually one of the things that I probably admire the most, even though it's very dumb, based for health reasons that we'll talk about. But tattoos have kind of played a role in Japanese culture in kind of this yo-yo fashion, where if you were a criminal back far enough, they would go ahead and brand you with rings around your arm. Depending on your crime, they would tattoo your forehead.
If you were like a murderer, you killed someone, forehead, theft, you would get a ring, and then you'd have multiple rings for how many times. Yeah. And you'd be like, how stupid are you? You got like 5 rings.
For how bad of a guy you are, we're going to go ahead and brand you for life. So anywhere you go, your record follows you. Mm-hmm. This isn't the Wild West where you can kill 3 people in one town and then ride your horse 30 minutes later and have a new life.
Yeah.
You're stuck with this for forever. This is kind of where we see this coming along and coming of age, where the Bakudo weren't exactly great people. So maybe early Bakudo did have tattoos that would kind of symbolize that they were in a business of ill repute, something that people didn't like. You want to stay away from that guy because he runs a gambling organization, anything like that. But they kind of start to wear them as these badges of honor.
Yeah.
And then it becomes cool.
Yeah, turn it into something that works for you.
Yeah, and then you have the Meiji Restoration that comes in, and all of a sudden tattoos are frowned upon and made illegal again. They don't end up getting made legal until, I believe it was the U.S. occupation after World War II.
And buddy, they're still frowned upon today.
Yeah, like you can't, there's places where you just, like bathhouses, hot springs, any kind of outdoor assemblies, like you can't show off your tattoos. You'll be asked to leave. Yeah. You'd just be kicked out.
Well, and I wonder if part of it came out of like covering up something. Like you have these tattoos for theft or something like that. And so what are you supposed to do? Like you can't remove them. That's not possible. So cover them up with something differently and kind of make it work for you. Even though anybody that's going to have a tattoo, they're going to know something is up crime related. But it's almost kind of like a smack in the face too, of being like, oh no, like I'll add to this. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get, like you were saying, the kind of the Shinto like lore and stuff coming in, like koi fish, dragons, all that kind of stuff, to where if you see someone with tattoos, like a lot of tattoos, these people are going to be instantly, you're going to be like, that's a member of the Yakuza. And I believe it's called Irizumi is the full body tattoos. Now, buddy, this is like old style where you see the person with the stick and the needle on it and tapping it with the other little stick and just going one little tap at a time.
A steel rod that's sharpened down to a point that gets dipped in pigment, and then that drive from the other stick hitting that piece of steel is driving that pigment into your skin.
And the person doing it is an expert at tapping it just into that certain layer of skin any deeper. It got to, so there were certain colors, like even, I was surprised at him. There was like the black, then there was red. I want to say orange was one of them, maybe orange or yellow, and then maybe like a purple. And
there was like a blue-green in there too.
Yep. And they were talking about how, like, when you were working with the red, you couldn't have very much because it was actually toxic, what they actually made the red dye out of. And so if you saw someone with a lot of red, you're like, oh, that guy's a fucking badass. Not only are they doing these tattoos full body, which some of these, like, they would have these things done over the course of like a year and being pretty constantly done because it took so long to do these. And when you see some of the original work, dude, you're like, how the fuck, like, this is art. There's no other way to describe it. Like, you can say whatever you want about the people that it's on, but for the artists that were doing this on these, it's incredible. I don't know how they felt about tattooing the genitalia though, because Irizumi did include, when they say full body, they mean full body, including dick and balls, with the exception of if you were to wear, just throw on a blazer or like a sport coat and button it, and what you would see is that strip of skin, that would be bare.
Your neckline would be bare. There would oftentimes all the way down the front of your chest and the middle would be bare. So if you had a kimono that was open, they wouldn't be able to see it. Traditionally, they would either cut off at the elbow or the wrist. The wrist came later as they were more prone to wear suits. But if you're wearing a kimono, if you cut it off at the elbow, it's very rare to see. The part that Chris was talking about this actually being poison, there is a very fair amount of Yakuza that died from liver failure. And most of it is in part, besides the drinking and the wild partying that they do, most of it's in part of the toxicity that they put into their bodies by tattooing themselves through this Irizumi, that your liver just can't take that much poison. So these guys are dying of liver failure.
You in for another touch-up? Yeah, my skin just keeps drinking this stuff up.
Yeah, I feel terrible every time we do this. But within that, there was sort of a hierarchy where every tattoo artist, every Irizumi artist would have like a brand, basically like a signature that they would hide somewhere in the tattoo depending on what the artwork called for, to where when these guys would show up for meetings in bathhouses, which they said that they went to bathhouses because A, it was private, and B, nobody could hide any weapons. I mean, unless you got the smaller sword jammed in your ass or something like that, you can't hide it. But it would almost be a status symbol when you would go into these meetings and you would see this famous tattoo artist, this famous Irizumi artist was the one that did your work.
I think they said that as the person got bigger and like more, what am I trying to say? Like prestigious of doing these tattoos within the Yakuza, they were allowed to increase the size of their signature, like their mark. Because then it would even be more of a sign when you could see that easier from further away. It would be more of that status for the actual Yakuza that had the tattoo, that person.
Yeah, you're carrying a coach purse now.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like a NASCAR or like an F1 uniform where like the larger patches are the more visible ones. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, and this was a fairly kind of it was the status quo. This was how you kind of proved that you were these high-ranking guys.
I will poison myself.
Yeah, but also at the same time, when you sit down for a full back piece and people see the intricacies and how much pain you had to go through to get this done, they're like, that's a bad dude.
Yeah.
And then you go out in public and you see these guys wearing suits and they're all very put together.
Not yet.
Well, yeah, but they're still, back then they were still dressing, I'm sure, in very fine silks, very nice kimonos.
Robes, I think it's still robes and stuff like
that. So kind of after that, the Yakuza had a pretty ruthless way of penance, of giving penance. If a Yakuza member fucked up bad enough that could hurt the syndicate, they could be removed. And once they were removed, they would be blackballed from any of the other gangs. Word would spread that this guy's persona non grata. You shouldn't bring him into your organization. He screwed up enough that he got kicked out.
Sir, not only are you not allowed back in this Applebee's, but good luck getting into any of the Applebee's within the Tri-County area.
And along those lines, there was always usually a beating that went along with your removal from the group. So you were probably pretty messed up for a while after that.
What was the way of self penance? If you're like, I'm going to get ahead of this.
Yubitsumi.
Yubitsumi.
Yubitsumi was this form of apology by going in front of your Oyaban or a higher ranking member. You would drop to your knees. You would lay out a white cloth. You would hold up your left hand, and you would start at the top knuckle of your pinky finger. You would go ahead and chop that off. You weren't allowed to show any sort of pain on your face. There's a bunch of bullshit that came in interviews with these guys that said if you truly felt sorry for what you did, you would not feel the pain of getting the top knuckle of your pinky cut off.
Jesus.
I don't see how that's even humanly possible.
So, crazy reason why it's actually the pinky that they start with. And
it makes total sense, though.
Oh, yeah, when you find out the reason. And people would have, you would fuck up 3 times, you'd lose your whole pinky because you got, you're working down on the knuckles. So when you're holding essentially the grip, when you're holding the proper grip, when you're holding like a katana, is you actually grip it the strongest with your bottom 3 fingers. So your pinky, your ring finger, and your middle finger. The thumb and the other one are meant to have more like finesse work to be able to move it within your hands.
Yeah, it's like swinging a baseball bat.
Yep. So when you were to remove the pinky, you're removing a part of the stabilization, and it actually reduces your ability to fight as well because you're not able to grip the bottom of that katana. So it has even its ties of their punishment back to being like, no, we're samurai. See, we do this.
Well, and it also was kind of a show of if you're weaker with a blade, you need to depend more on the unit than making the choices on your own.
Yeah.
I do wonder if some guy got on his hands and knees and dropped down and held up his right hand and started cutting, and the Oyaban's like, wait, what are you doing? He goes, I'm left-handed. I hold the katana the other way. The bottom hand is my right hand. And he's like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead, continue.
Yeah.
But these knuckles would then be wrapped in the white cloth and given to the Oyaban. Some of these guys actually kept like a collection of fingers. I'm sure that there were weeks when they're like, oh, God, they're looking in their drawer. They're like, Phil, Brad, Steve, we got to tighten stuff up around here. We got to get some higher guys up in here.
Brad again?
He's got a whole section.
Okay, I was going to save this for later, but because we're talking about that, but also then going back to kind of the tattoos. So there's kind of been a new thing that they've been doing as well, and it's called pearling. Did you read anything about this?
No, I don't like that name.
Nope. So basically, you would take and I'm sure it's relatively small, but you would take like a synthetic pearl.
Yeah.
And they insert them under the skin of the shaft of their penis.
Oh.
And traditionally, it is 1 pearl in the dick for each year in prison. They said that like it increases, like they're like, yeah, it makes it so much more pleasurable and everything. I'm like, man, that's under the skin of your dick. I'm like, that's already sensitive enough as it is. But then also, I'm kind of curious about it.
There's no curiosity on my part. It's like a Prince Albert. There's nothing.
Oh no, like not curious enough to actually like explore that, but just kind of be like, I wonder.
I do wonder if Japanese people are circumcised. With the knife culture, you would think that it would lead more towards circumcision, but at the same time, you just never know.
Someone let us know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect contribution. We love hearing from everybody.
Watch for the poll this week.
Along with that, crossing over into the 20th century, the Yakuza would kind of find refuge in this new governmental organizations with far-right nationalists. If you're coming from a samurai culture and you believe that you have some connection to being the protectorate of Japan, nationalism is right up your alley. Mm-hmm. You are going to hold Japanese people on the highest rung, and then everybody else is just everybody else.
You're also with that isolationist view that like the Shogun had because that's who they were in support of.
So, and again, we're talking a move into the 20th century, so we're getting into the 1920s, which is after the Russian Revolution. Lenin comes in, the Bolsheviks win out, and you have communism coming up. So if you align yourself with the far right that are anti-communist, you are going to be called upon in almost like the U.S. version of the Pinkertons, where you are going in to squash out labor strikes and trying to root out the communism that you believe is coming from the labor strikes, not just the quest for equality. Mm-hmm. there was a guy named Toyama Mitsuru who created a secret society called the Black Ocean Society. He invited a lot of the Yakuza heads to come in and mingle with some of these nationalistic governmental leaders.
Was it Mitsuru Toyama?
Yeah, Toyama Mitsuru Toyama. There's
Oh, you did the proper.
yeah, we're gonna. It's weird because in Japan the surname comes first before the first name, so there will be some mixing and mingling of those two things. But Mitsuru Toyama is how we would say it. As he created this Black Ocean Society and kind of started to introduce the Yakuza into the government, he would start greenlighting assassinations of these multiple liberal political figures, and the Yakuza were the ones that were handing out these assassinations.
So he creates this. Is it Dark Ocean or Black Ocean? It's one of the two.
Yeah.
Dark Ocean or Black Ocean. 1881. So this dude, Mitsuru Toyama, like you said, ultra nationalist. He actually participated in one of the last samurai's uprisings.
Damn.
To like challenge the Meiji or whatever it was. Spent 3 years in prison. As soon as he's out, he joins this ultra nationalist movement. He ends up meeting the Yakuza through this because they have shared interest within kind of this belief, and basically just starts, like you said, aiming himself at political opponents against these ultra nationalists. As this kind of catches on, the Yakuza are just kind of like going right in with it.
Yeah,
they're riding the wave in with this ultra nationalist.
They're swimming downstream. They're not necessarily having to push against the currents for anything. We get a gentleman named, and again, this could be one of the other, Hirokichi Yamaguchi. He would end up creating the future largest faction inside of the Yakuza in Kobe in 1915, the Yamaguchi Gumi faction. Don't know where Gumi comes from. Sounds a lot like gummy. There's only one M. But it was born out of these dock workers that started falling under his control in 1915. And when you start running protection for those guys, as we talked about earlier, if you can control the ports, you can control the flow of goods, you're skimming money off the top of everything that's being imported. It's a very, very good business to be in. They would start kind of this conglomeration of gangs as these power struggles among rival factions would flare violence in Japan. So violence is never good for business. In the lower rungs of society, it's going to bring unwanted attention to you for crimes that shouldn't be happening, that are kind of highlighting the other crimes that are going on along your groups. So if you can bring more people under your banner and stop the fighting and the squabbling, and you can kind of control a larger territory, there's going to be less of these dust-ups, which is going to be better for business.
Jumping back over to Toyama for a second. So this Dark Ocean Society that he ends up forming the basis of Japan's intelligence network that they're going to utilize and then like carry into like World War II and everything. So it's weird to think that there are these just like major players that have all of this pull there. And with, the Yamaguchi Gumi coming straight out of Kobe, in steps this guy named Kazuo, is it Teoka?
Yeah, Teoka I had after we do Yoshio.
Oh, okay.
But either way, I mean, we're into kind of a timeline, but at the same time, these guys had pretty long careers within the Yakuza.
Mm-hmm. These head guys did because they're protected. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we can jump into him, or we can do Komada first. I think Komada is kind of my crown jewel for this episode because he seems to have done a lot.
Okay, go ahead.
So Yoshio Komada was this right-wing nationalist. He was very strong in his beliefs. He went overseas for a while, kind of got a hold of some informants, made some friends on the mainland. He would end up coming back to Japan. He was arrested for multiple different things. He was trying to pass a letter to Hirohito, kind of basically outlining these reforms that his group wanted to see being played out. He got apparently too close to Hirohito, and they went ahead and arrested him, put him in jail for 6 months. He comes back out, kind of gets involved with some more serious ultra-nationalists, and ends up getting tied up and arrested in this right-wing attempt to assassinate the prime minister Miyoki?
He doesn't get tied up in it. The dude in 33, this dude forms this thing called the Independent Youth Society. And it's like sole goal was the assassination of political opponents. He formed the group that did this. This Kodama guy is a piece of shit.
He is, and he screws everybody. So this Prime Minister Makoto, that was their main target, ends up finding out about the plot. He sends his police to end up imprisoning Kodama for 3.5 years. Upon his release, he comes out, and Makoto his government's kind of curious about what this guy can do because he seems to have had some connections back on the mainland.
We're getting into a time frame now leading up to World War II and pre-World War II. This is when Japan is kind of stretching out its hands into mainland Asia and into China and all those areas to start building up those resources and everything. With this Kodama guy, he had been spending the time making all these connections, these black market underground connections, and has basically been able to can smuggle shit in and out. And because they're in a position where they're like, we need every bit of war material. Who cares if he's ripping off these people on the mainland and everything? We're going to get as much as we can. So I want to say he smuggled in info about enemy movements in areas that they wanted to Japan wanted to try to move into, radium, copper, cobalt. And then along with something else that he will start importing, I think a little bit post-World War II.
Oh, no, this was during these shipments. He's getting these precursors in, and he's building these networks of imports. And at the same time, he needs to line his pocket with a little bit more money. I'm sure he's skimming off the top of what's coming in. But also, if you can get these shipments in, you can start bringing heroin in from Southeast Asia. You can start bringing maybe a cousin in the amphetamines department of methamphetamine before it becomes mass produced in Japan.
It's the Japanese version of Pervitin that they gave to the Nazis and everything to keep them up for days during the Blitz and all that kind of stuff. So the Japanese, during the war, they were on meth. And because the government and the military is supplying this, they're coming with these shipments. Oh no, a shipment gets lost. And all of a sudden, Kodama has all this meth that he can distribute at this point.
Yeah. Kodama is kind of the setup man for what the government officials have in store for World War II and the occupation of kind of East Asia, China, Manchuria.
Here's how serious they were about him. He was made I want to say it was a rear admiral. Yeah. So he was actually made a rear admiral in the Imperial Japanese Navy. Enough so to where he had enough attention on him so there were classes of war criminals and everything that were imprisoned after World War II. And I'm not sure if the class was the same between the Tokyo Convention and the Geneva Convention and everything, but it was Rear Admiral. He was actually imprisoned after World War II as a Class A war criminal, which I guess was the most common. The most people that were classified as war criminals were Class A. So I guess Class A it was the least.
No, it was the highest level threat.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they tied him to sending opium into Manchuria and Korea and kind of softening up that underbelly for them to go in and occupy. And he's a rear admiral in the Imperial Japanese Navy. He's
going to get some attention
in the shit,
when we
for
see
sure.
Your records, and we're looking at so we're going to need to bring in all of these admirals.
Yeah, all of the admirals had to have been Class A because those are the guys that have swallowed the propaganda completely.
Yeah. So he ends up getting released in 1948. He's rich as shit because even though he's been in prison, his operation has still been just humming, and basically starts just chasing communists. Because guess what? Now it's the Red Menace.
Yeah.
The Red Scare it's taken over everywhere. Russia was the old enemy before World War II when they had defeated the Russian Navy.
And the Sino-Japanese Wars, too.
And so, he's going to go ahead and start chasing commies. And guess what? Lo and behold, guess who's occupying Japan still at this point?
United States.
The United States. What does the United States hate? Especially during that, we still today, of course. But what did we hate so much at that time?
Communism.
And so anyone that hates communists must also be a friend of ours. Let's go ahead and make him a CIA asset.
What the fuck, man? This guy tried to kill the prime minister on his way out, the prime minister starts working with him after he gets out of prison to start building up what they need for World War II and occupying into China and Manchuria and everything.
It makes it even less sense now when you tell me that, like, grade A, and of course now it makes sense that the class A war criminal was the worst, but at the same time you're just like, well, he does hate communism though. Yeah, but did you see like all the atrocities and like all the shit that he smuggled and everything? But he hates communism. Sign him up.
He also loves being referred to as one of the richest Asian men alive at that time.
Yep.
Because he has made so much money. At the same time, he was collecting a check from the United States to go over and do these things.
The 50s and 60s, the CIA were funding quite a few ultranationalist groups just to fight the communist groups. They didn't care who they were supporting as long as it was aimed at the fucking Reds and the communists. It was just like, yeah, give them money, write them a check.
Yeah, we'll get back into that because the occupation time is very interesting, but we have to finish going through how his career just gets ended. And it gets ended in the most Kodama way possible. In the 1970s, his career would absolutely be squashed. His name would be besmirched. He would end up getting arrested for tax evasion. It came to light that Kodama had actually taken bribes for contracts within Japan from Lockheed Martin.
Yeah.
He was just handing out these business contracts, these not military because they weren't allowed to have one.
It was
during the occupation times.
It essentially was.
They could have a defense force.
It was to help them build up the defense force.
Yeah, so Lockheed Martin goes ahead and starts handing Kodama a fair amount of money between the 50s and the 70s. He ran this racket for 20 years before they ended up catching up to him. 1977, he ends up dying before he goes to trial for the tax evasion charges on the money that he was given from Lockheed Martin. Just the most ultimate flip-flop. Whoever can benefit me is going to be wherever I go.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, is this dude was very, very involved in like the political scene. He was the representative of like the ultranationalists when it came to like Japan's like government, like whatever system that they were using at that point. And so when this took him down, the reason there was such blowback on this is the ultranationalists are supposed to be so pro-Japan that anything that's not Japanese is supposed to be evil.
Why are you doing a deal with an American company?
That's the exact point. Not only that, but you're also taking money off the top of that. So you're giving less money that would go to the Japanese government, which could help the Japanese people already by giving them a deal. But then you're also then stealing that money from the Japanese people. So as someone that's completely pushing themselves and everything about them is this ultranationalist image, now all of a sudden you have the people that were previously ultranationalists are just like, no, fuck this guy.
Yeah, how do you go back and face that group and try to blend in with them anymore? How you lose all of this respect that you gained through all of these crazy plots. I'm sure they probably weren't super pumped with him. They probably didn't know he was a CIA asset at the time, but there had to have been an acknowledgement that he was friendly with the occupiers, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of that stuff people were aware of. I mean, there was a lot of like rebuilding and shit going on.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy in Kodama that was a Yakuza member in some way, shape, or form. He's not a Kamicho. He's not the head of a faction.
No.
He was just kind of this rogue force within the nationalist Yakuza gangbang that was very, very popular.
One of the things that Kodama actually did, and we're kind of jumping around here because we're kind of going by these characters and these factions to kind of build them up. Some of the stuff you'll see how it kind of aligns. In the 60s and 70s, the Yamaguchi-gumi, and then this other syndicate that came in, the Iwagawa Kai.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that war.
Correct, but what I'm doing is tying it into Kodama. Basically, they were getting ready to gear up to go to war against each other. Kodama steps in because of his relationship with being, the ultranationalist guy and having relationships with all members of the Yakuza or like the head honchos and everything. Stepped in and was like, okay, listen, this isn't going to be good for anybody. I'm going to go ahead. He brokers a peace in October of 72. He's this guy that has a hand in both arenas. He's got the Yakuza connections that are able to intimidate the politicians that he is trying to get stuff through or getting to stop opposing his things, which will then turn around and benefit the Yakuza.
Well, and At the same time, if you're trying to take governmental pressure off of the Yakuza to let them carry out your ultra-nationalist communism busting so you can continue being a CIA asset, you need to keep them off of the government's purview.
They turned on him so much before his death. A guy tried to crash a plane into his house to kill him. He hit like the next house down and everything, but he literally tried to crash a plane into his house to kill him.
Kamikaze, he had to have been on meth too, probably.
The kind of the shitty part of this is he ends up dying of a stroke in 1984. He was still...
I thought he died in 77.
No, in 1984, he dies of a stroke before the end of his trial. Because he is on trial, essentially. Because it's the end of the 70s that he's on the whole tax evasion thing that took him down the show.
I thought he died during that.
No, it was during the trial for that. But apparently the gears of government at that time, especially for someone connected like he probably was, probably grind kind of slowly.
They probably weren't too gung-ho about getting him prosecuted.
Probably not. It just brought up old shit that was going to just hurt the government in general. But yeah, so didn't even make it to the end of his trial.
Yeah, I feel like he probably died bad enough. But just to know that this guy played every side of the coin is pretty impressive and made as much money as he did. A guy that ran kind of along the similar lines, Kazuo Taoka. He's got my favorite nickname out of this. He was an orphan that would become the third boss in the Yamaguchi Gumi faction after the original boss's son had passed away. He was imprisoned for murder from 1937 to 1943. You heard that right. He did 6 years for murder. That doesn't feel like a lot.
And it was right smack kind of during the war.
Yeah. So maybe they had a different outlook on murder. Yeah. He was nicknamed the Bear because apparently in his fighting style, once he got his opponent down, he would start clawing at their eyes.
This guy was basically the Don Corleone of the Yakuza.
Pretty ruthless. By 43, when he gets out, he's got a wife, he's got a family. The Bear, coming out of hibernation, the Bear is always going to be a little bit more in his own mind. He's not going to be as violent. He's going to be a little bit more cerebral. And Taoka does a lot of very, very good things. And this comes along financially with this U.S. occupation where there is going to be more strict rule. But Taoka basically looked at all of their business ventures and he's like, this is not going to play in this climate. All of these back alley deals and the shit that we do in the shadows probably isn't going to go well. So if we can start taking our financial ventures into more semi-legitimate businesses, it's going to end up looking better.
Well, it also kind of broadens the scope of what the Yakuza is able to influence because during the 30s and 40s, he got the membership, I think, of the Yamaguchi Gumi up to about 13,000 members, and they were in 36 out of like the 47 provinces of Japan.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a lot of kind of spreading your wings and taking in more area.
Or prefectures. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Can we take a bathroom break before we go any further?
Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back. Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials. Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. All right, we're talking Taoka. So, 1958, he's got 70,000. And by 1963, 184,000. Not just Taoka, I'm just all of the Yakuza, people that are considered Yakuza. You have a couple main syndicates at this time. So that's, as far as that goes, to jump from 70,000 and in 5 years up to 184 to double that. Like, this is also during that boom of like Reconstruction.
Yep.
That was like businesses were just springing up for all kinds of stuff in Japan.
Business is good. For Taoka, he ends up hitting the meth jackpot because there were a bunch of Japanese reserves of methamphetamines after they lost the war. They were ahead of time in their production, and somehow the United States just lets Taoka take a very large portion of these meth reserves.
I have a theory about that. How much of that do you think, because they didn't know that they were going to have to surrender after the bombs were dropped.
Yeah.
They assumed it was going to be an invasion of the home islands.
So they probably boosted supplies.
Had so much of that shit built up to just wire people to be able to defend nonstop.
Yeah, that's definitely, that has to be
Which
what
means
it
they
was.
had so much meth.
Yeah. And the United States just kind of looks the other way as Taoka and the other Yakuza just go on a spending spree. Or a selling spree.
MacArthur doesn't care.
Nah.
General MacArthur, who's in charge of Japan, the occupation at this time, he knows about the Yakuza, but guess what? They hate communists too. So he's like, fine, fuck it. Do your guys' thing. Honestly, I'm only here for a little bit longer. And, not my problem.
He's still telling the Philippine story in Japan, for sure.
There's food shortages. The Yakuza step in to help with that. So the public are like, oh, okay, I guess they're not all bad at this point. And they get to the point where they're doing enough of this stuff. And of course, they're profiting off of it because they're skimming supplies off the top of the American shipments and all this stuff coming in, or they're buying stuff that the fucking American occupation soldiers are selling them and shit. And I don't mean like, oh, hey, this is my MRE, buy this. No, they're taking shit off of shipments and being like, hey, pay us cash for this. And so by supplying a black market for goods that just even simple stuff that was really hard to come by during the occupation, they kind of make the public feel a little bit indebted to them. They kind of reestablish a little bit of more of that honor Robin Hood-ish type thing.
I think you and I take two different approaches to a black market. I definitely understand where you're coming from. At the same time, a black market is only created out of a need. After World War II, there was such an influx of Japanese that were interned in the United States and other places that were then coming back to Japan. So as you get a rise in population, you get a rise in inflation because when the demand outweighs the supply, the prices go up.
All of your soldiers are coming back to an area that's been in full war production, milking this thing dry with all of the supplies, the food, all that kind of stuff. And now all of a sudden they're coming back at the same time.
Yeah.
You also have a ton of soldiers that are coming back that don't really have, they might even be addicted to meth at that point, depending on how much they were, ordered to take and everything. So not only are all these people coming back, all of a sudden the Yakuza, the Yamaguchi-gumi have this huge supply of meth. They're like, we've already got a built-in fucking audience here. We've got a market that's already established.
And a black market only springs up out of the need and the desire. And if you have super inflation on all of these prices and you don't have a way to make money, but you can only scrape up what you can, if you're having to buy your rice, like you were talking about from the Yakuza, that's to feed your family.
Yeah.
You're not out there buying fun stuff. Like you're not trying to get the latest, I guess they didn't have video games back then, but the latest entertainment forms. You're buying necessities from the Yakuza because they're necessities.
Yeah.
And if your government, there's so many times when the Yakuza steps in because of government bureaucracy, red tape, what have you, that they fill a need and a void for the public. That I do agree. It's certainly a way to get the public on their side, but at the same time, it's still fulfilling a need, which is kind of where stuff gets tough.
No, I agree that a thing doesn't exist if it's already taken care of. That's the reason stuff falls through the cracks, and then someone's going to, when someone takes their off the ball, someone's going to step in and fill that hole.
Yeah, and like you say, boom time, we're talking about the 60s. There are over 180,000 members, which we were talking about in the beginning of this episode. 180,000 members, equivalent to what was going on in the American mob during the 20th century, in their most dominant time in the mid-20th century. There was an estimated 5,000 full-fledged made men members in the American mob. They did have thousands of associates across the country, but the American mob totaled 5,000 guys.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 180,000 guys in that same shrink down area that you're talking about in the concentration, and half of the population of the United States. So they're fucking 36xing the amount of soldiers that are out there fighting for the Yakuza as opposed to the American mob.
Well, we come to the 60s and 70s, and all of a sudden, stuff starts just gearing up. The 50s were this huge kind of industrial like economic recovery period. And it also took place in the 50s was, I want to say the San Francisco Peace Treaty is what it was called. I can't remember the exact year. It was April of sometime during the 50s. But this basically ended the United States occupation of Japan. So everyone got to go in and do their own shit at this point. And as that happened, by 68, and since then, Japan has ranked as the number 3 economic power in the world.
Fueled by meth.
No kidding. It's keeping a lot of people up. And during the 60s and 70s, this is just this huge prosperous period for both the Yamaguchi-gumi and then also this more Tokyo-based syndicate called the Iwagawa Kai. So they end up almost going to war because even though, the Yamaguchi-gumi is based in Kobe, they still want Tokyo or to have some hold in Tokyo because there's a huge market there and they're going to make money. So again, Kodama comes in. He ends up brokering the peace in 1972. And then
in a televised event, they did this on national TV in Japan, the signing of this alliance that they're forging out in the public space.
This is, I think, the main difference between the American mafia or just the Italian mob in general and the Yakuza. The Yakuza are very just out. They are very out in the open, so much so that they have their own like corporate symbols. You can kind of look them up. And these will be on the outsides of the buildings that are like their headquarters. It's just like, hey, this is the Yamagumi or the Yamaguchi-gumi headquarters. And same thing with the other syndicates. They'll have it on business cards. They'll wear it on pins. They had a magazine that they actually about the business dealings. I'm not fucking shitting you. They actually published a magazine that was available to the public that would show you all of the business dealings. Not the illegal shit, of course, but almost as a way to be like, no, like this is where we're making our money. We're totally legitimate. Look, you can read about it in this not at all biased publication.
Just full legitimization when you go to print for them to be able to point to all of their good works and all of their good deeds and try to spin everything. But just think about walking down the middle of Main Street, USA. You're in downtown, and all of a sudden you look up and you see like a Lucchese symbol on the side of it. But this is Vegas. This is Vegas, except for they didn't put whatever mob syndicate was running that specific casino on the front of it.
It was just the Lucchese Hotel and Casino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Kind of, yeah. That's pretty much what it is. I mean, they're advertising themselves as if they're like a corporation.
Well, we'll talk about kind of later on with some of their good works, quote unquote, to where they would open some of these buildings to people that were affected by an earthquake or a tsunami or anything
for
like
that.
Refuge
centers and stuff like that.
Of course, there were definitely doors that were locked and rooms you couldn't go into.
No one on the lower levels.
No.
1978, Kazuo Toyoka, the leader of the Yamaguchi-gumi, he ends up, at this point, has built up his ranks to 120,000. What's the technical term for him?
Yamaguchi-gumi?
No, the rank. The like lowest rank of just like the foot soldiers. The Koban. So 120,000 in his ranks, most of them made up of Koban. But
one faction out of the 180,000, one faction has 120,000.
It's about 15 years later. So there's even more at that point. They said at the very peak that they say that at the very peak was the 184,000. But then how do you say that when just one of them has, they're like, well, yeah, but this one shrunk down really small and this one exploded and they kind of go through an ebb and a flow. No, it's not like that. They're growing during this entire time period.
Well, part of it too is alliances that are being forged that are under the Yamaguchi-gumi banner.
Yeah, when you're not killing each other, you're going to grow. When the job's a little bit safer, people are going to join up. In July of 78, Toyoka ends up getting shot at a club and ends up taking one in the neck.
What was he doing at the time?
Was it a ladies of the nightclub?
A limbo competition.
Was he?
He gets shot in the middle of a limbo competition.
Was he going to win?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yes. Regardless if he hit the pole. It was one of those times where they go to do the limbo and it's really low. And as he goes under it, they keep raising the bar and everything.
Then everybody cheers when he comes through. Yeah, ends up getting shot in the neck. Survives because he was a G. And a couple weeks later, they end up finding the would-be assassin dead in a forest of trees back in Kobe.
Oh, just completely brutalized. They find out, though, that the shooter is a member of another faction called the Matsuda Gumi clan. So we got another Gumi clan, the Matsuda Gumi. And basically this kicks off this era of like a Yakuza war. You don't try to fucking take a shot at the lead guy as especially a much, much less like powerful syndicate and not expect anything to happen. The initial reprisal ends up leading to like 5 of these Matsuda Gumi clan assassinated just in the reprisal itself. But you said there were like how many gunfights that broke out?
That's the Ichiwakai and the Matsu.
Oh, that's the one that happens a little bit later.
We're rolling into it. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Taioka tries to recover. He ends up not being able to get back in the saddle. You got to have like a strong figurehead. You can't have someone, be in a position of weakness in that role. And it's starting to cause some unrest within like the Yamaguchi Gumi. Basically, they're starting to divide. You have like a segment that's like threatening to break off. So they need some stability. And who's going to step in to do that? Give me Fumiko Taioka, his old lady. She steps in and is basically like, I'm going to hold shit down till a replacement could be found.
Yeah, we've seen this a couple times with presidents where their wives have been certainly more in the saddle than the actual president. Pretty unheard of that a woman, totally unheard of that they're a figurehead. In their history, though, kind of in their past, not so far in the past, during World War II.
I completely skipped over the fact that this guy died. That's why his wife stepped in.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was 1981. He ends up dying of a heart attack.
Yeah, in July.
There's a 3-year period where his wife takes over. But kind of the precedence where this happened was during World War II when there was conscription in Japan.
Oh, yeah. The old ladies ran shit.
The women stepped in, to run these organizations.
Kind of the same thing like they did in the United States to like build the fucking planes.
Rosie the Riveter type stuff, yeah. And
Fumiko I don't know.
Fumiko the Fixer.
Yeah.
So as she is in there 3 years, a fairly long stretch of time, but then it comes time to where they have to elect a new head.
Did you hear about Taioka's funeral?
Yeah, it was incredible. There was
1,300 people end up showing up. It's this huge, like, public funeral. Like, it's televised and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, during his time as the head of the Yamaguchi Gumi, they said his, like, ending worth was, or at the time when he was, like, at its peak, what he was bringing in as part of the Yamaguchi Gumi, the syndicate as a whole, $460 million a year.
That's pretty good business.
Yeah.
It's not quite Escobar business, but it's pretty good business.
Yeah. Okay, so Fumiko steps in. She's in there for 3 years, and then they find someone to take the reins.
So just to get back to this funeral real quick, all of these Yakuza members show up. Everybody is dressed in these ink black suits. The government sees what's going on with this public display and immediately rushes the police down. There's videos of these guys getting frisked like as they're walking into the funeral procession. And there's heightened security because they know that when a head falls and there's already been a little bit of dissension among the ranks when he was weak, things might pop off pretty quickly as maybe potentially a turf war. It seems to go okay. But again, this is a televised funeral. This is on national TV that they're mourning the loss of the guy that's in charge of the biggest syndicate in the Yakuza.
There's also this new look to the Yakuza as well, because during this American occupation, all kinds of stuff comes over. It's not just the soldiers and the occupation force. It's all the stuff that Americans want and like because they want to feel like they're at home. So you get all of this like American cinema and all of this, basically just like pop culture things like that. One of the things that the new Yakuza looked at and were inspired by were these American movies about like the fucking mob and the mafia.
How could you not be?
Yeah, you see these guys wearing crisp suits and everything, and so wearing sunglasses. This is where you kind of get the move over to more of the Yakuza look that people are probably familiar with, the crisp black suits. I don't really see a lot of other colored suits. Black looks good, and like almost the Wayfarers, like the dark sunglasses, and this is the look. This is what you would say would be the Yakuza uniform.
Riding around in giant black sedans.
That's the other thing too, is they saw the Lincolns and all that, and they're like, "Fuck the economy cars, fuck the Honda, like get me a Lincoln or get me a Cadillac." And so they just went whole hog into adapting this for kind of their own look.
Their diversification was pretty incredible, pretty funny. They would run production studios where they would just pump out all of these movies that were pro-Yakuza, showing them just doing all of this badass stuff, kind of copying what mob movies did.
Yeah.
They would run talent agencies which unfortunately would then see the women coming into the talent agencies being sucked into the sex trade.
Yep.
And traded. Human trafficking kind of becomes something that they just get okay with. There's a lot of points in time during this episode where I see the Yakuza doing something like, yeah, it's drugs. There has to be a demand that they are supplying first in order to be in the position to supply it. Human trafficking, there's never, that's a line that it doesn't matter how much demand there is.
As soon as I read that, like I can be like, when I'm reading through like what they're doing, I'm like, okay. And as soon as you hit that either sex trade or human trafficking or anything like that, it's just like, no, you lost me.
Yeah, we've gone too far.
Yeah.
This is a bridge too far for me to just kind of pass off.
All right. So Fumiko's out.
Yep.
New guys in 1984.
They hold the conclave. They hold the meeting where everybody comes in and votes. There's kind of some dissension among the votes. There's some people that end up stepping out as far as just a no vote. They think that there's kind of some gerrymandering going on. Matsuhisa Takenaka ends up being chosen in 1984. It's pretty sick.
And it's easier to pronounce. Masahisa Takanaka.
There's a lot of these.
Masahisa Takanaka. It's a song.
There's a lot of these names that have crossover to like New Japan wrestlers and All Japan wrestlers. So
Nice.
when I see their name, I'm like, I've seen that in print. I've heard it said a million times.
Kind of around this time too, like a third player comes in, and this becomes like the third main between the Yamaguchi Gumi, the Iwakawa Kai, and then also this new guy stepping on the scene is the Sumiyoshi Kai. And this one runs a little bit differently than the traditional Yakuza syndicates were, because instead of just having one Oyabon, one head of the table, they actually kind of rule more so as a committee. They have several Oyabon that are on the exact same level that kind of rule their own cells, but they all work together. They rule equally. They also have less dues because, believe me, if you're part of the Yakuza, like you have dues. You have to be bringing money and paying into the Yakuza to have basically the membership. Mm-hmm. So their dues are less. And then they also provide their Obon, or not their Obon, their Koban, with more autonomy. So they're not as like strict as far as like controlling them and everything. So all of a sudden, like, I don't know what it was like. Were there trades or were there like free agents? Like someone would be part of this one. They wouldn't get kicked out. They would just be like, cause leaving was insanely hard. It wasn't. Yeah. So by leaving, you're saying I'm not going to go join up. Like that wasn't something that went down, right?
I'm sure within like the alliances that they formed, there was probably a lot of trade among foot soldiers.
But like, I need a left-handed reliever.
Yeah, this guy wants to move to be closer to his family back in Kobe. Where can we send him if we don't have a spot for him on our roster?
He's like, who do we have? And he's looking through the farm system and trying to find someone that'll be an appropriate trade.
There's a gangster to be named later in the trade.
Is there like a free agency period?
It has to be somewhere along there. So this dissension that happens among the vote when Takenaka is brought in, he was crowned the Kumicho in this, again, another televised ceremony where there's flowers everywhere. It's
gotta let them know.
Great show. He doesn't even make it a full year in that position because of the dissension. He ends up getting assassinated in the elevator of his girlfriend's building. So he was headed over for a little sneaky link to get a little lovin'.
As you do.
And the defectors...
It's a stressful job, Adam. Jesus.
The defectors had known that he had this girlfriend. So the Ichiwa Kai, not to be confused with the Inagawa Kai, or the Inagawa Kai. The Ichiwa Kai was a group that had defected. They were led by a guy named Hiroshi Yamamoto. Nailed that one in my sleep.
Okay, so we've got 5 that we've discussed so far. Yamaguchi, Iwagawa, Sumiyoshi, and then the 2 smaller ones, the Matsuda Gumi, and now the
Ichiwa Kai.
Okay.
Yeah, they put this hit out. It's effective. They take out Takenaka in less than a year. His funeral, again, just like Taioka, is televised on TV. This time, there is a hell of a lot more security because they know exactly how he died, and they know that there's tensions.
Yeah.
And this whole thing ends up sparking this thing called the Yamaichi War. And this war would last for 4 years. There would be 300 gun battles that take place during these 4 years.
There were still sword fights as well.
Yep, still sword
Much
fights.
Fewer, but these guys still did carry swords, and sometimes they use them.
Well, and that's kind of the main driver of this, where I think in the United States, everybody had guns. So
what do you want someone pulling on you?
sword.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What if like there's no getting away?
Still a sword.
Okay.
Because a sword at least can get me in semi-striking distance, where if that guy's 12 feet away from me and he pops me, there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I can slide tackle him. I can go for the ankles, double leg, anything before he gets me with that sword. That's when you go
cut. I hate getting cut. I haven't been shot, so I can't compare it to that. I just hate getting cut.
Yeah, occasionally you catch a kitchen knife that's always pretty sharp, and it hits you, and you look at it.
Thank God this wasn't a katana.
You get that feeling when you cut yourself and you look at it, and you think, "Oh shit, I might have gotten away with that," and then 10 seconds later, it just starts gushing blood.
So this whole time, we're the police.
Pretty
complicit in all this. They have knowledge that this stuff is going on. There's obviously some stuff being overlooked. And it kind of comes to a head in a big way in 1983 when this huge like bribery scandal ends up happening. It's plastered all over the media. It's this huge deal. The result of it ends up in 124 officers either being fired or disciplined.
Well, why were they fired or disciplined? Because they were plants that the Yakuza had weaseled their way into the police department, so they had rats.
Yes.
And also, you had to have all of the higher-ups in the police department that were greenlighting these known Yakuza
I said it was a bribery
associates.
scandal. Yeah, that's what it was. Money was exchanging hands, and it shouldn't have been.
But at the same time, like, how willing are you to try to fight against these guys? Because I don't know what the Japanese police numbers were. I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say that there were less than 184,000 Japanese police officers in the country.
This was kind of an insane stat, and I remembered it. I didn't have to write it down. So they said the number of officers that they lost that were either disciplined or fired would normally be the amount of officers that they would have for a city of 70,000 people. That's fucking nuts, right?
Yeah, dude. That's so many officers that they end up having to dismiss. But at the same time, that happens. You're cutting the ranks before this Yamaichi war starts, so you're already starting off on a bad foot because you've lost a bunch of officers, whether they were more supportive of the
whether
Yakuza
they would be firing
at
at the Yakuza or not.
Yeah.
How Are you just making sound effects? Your gun's not going off.
Why are you only shooting at one side?
Yeah. Lower.
So out of these 300 gun battles, they end up killing 36 total on both sides, or total between both sides. There would be a ton more that were wounded. But at the same time, 300 gun battles in a country that guns are illegal. Their murder rate is already very low. Their gun deaths are like 5% of what the United States is.
What year is this war taking place?
I believe it was 84 to 88, potentially. They would end up kind of brokering peace. There was the Yamaguchi Gumi that basically came out on top. As soon as they do that, they realize, got to get back to good business. What we can go ahead and do is we can broker peace. We can offer the defectors the ability to rejoin the Yamaguchi Gumi to kind of extend the olive branch, maybe, to get back to just normal business. But one of the big things that we kind of need to talk about, we'll talk about it with some crazy shit that comes up very soon. In fact, I think it's actually like the next thing we're going to talk about, but to get guns into the country was always very difficult. It was going to be a situation where you would have to go out and find another country that supplies guns. You'd have to find enough ammo to bring over to make it worth it. So out of these 300 gun battles, that could be, 10 shots fired, 15 shots fired. As we were talking about in the warm-up.
It could be 3 shots fired.
Yeah. That might be
two people firing each other technically could be a gun battle.
Somebody firing one over the bow in a fit of traffic rage, a fit of road rage.
It could be, I popped 2 shots into a restaurant. Someone came out of the restaurant and fired one at me when I was in. People are like, it was a fucking battle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still scary as shit, but.
And there's a lot of stuff that's still coming from the outside to kind of challenge this Yakuza. You have Chinese gangs. You have the triads from Hong Kong that are kind of trying to feel out these bigger markets. But the Yakuza are so big within their country that it doesn't. I mean, you can try to get a foothold. You might be able to hold on for 6 months, but eventually the Yakuza are just going to run you over. It took place during this Yamaichi War, 1985. this one, Masashi Takanaka, ends up being arrested in Hawaii as he was trying to trade 32 pounds of meth and 2 pounds of heroin. He had another 20 pounds of meth and 10 pounds of heroin that were still in Hong Kong for...
In Hong Kong?
Yeah, so
okay.
they were shipping it out of Hong Kong.
Gotcha.
For 138 caliber pistols, 5 rocket launchers, and a machine gun.
A partridge in a pear tree.
They always up the street value on this shit just to make it sound like a bigger haul. This one I would probably be willing to believe because it's a lot of meth and a lot of heroin. Mm-hmm. They said it was somewhere around $52 million that they were going to be exchanging for. I mean, 5 rocket launchers, 138 caliber handguns, and a machine gun. Probably not going to be cheap. I don't think $52 million. They were probably giving up more than they were getting back.
I don't know if it's current facts or anything, but they were saying that like a handgun that would normally sell for like $400 in the United States would sell over there for like $4,000. So I'm not sure if that's like a common day stat or back like in the 80s. Was Masashi Takanaka related to Masahisa Takanaka?
I believe so.
Okay.
Supposedly when he laid eyes on the rocket launchers, he says, I can touch them now. Like, I can't get up, I can't run up and get him with a samurai sword. I'm probably not going to get a clean shot on him with just a handgun. You give me a rocket launcher, I'm winning. This is GTA.
Okay, so we're making the deal. I'm DEA, right? But you don't know I'm DEA.
Yes, this is DEA.
So we're making this deal. Mm-hmm. I say, here are the guns. Here is your rocket launcher, sir. Are we making a deal? Would you like to make this deal?
I look at you. I stick my hand out. I say, "Hi."
And I know "hi" to mean yes. So all of a sudden, there has been an agreement for an exchange of drugs and guns and everything. Bam, you're arrested. Gotcha. Open and shut case, right?
Yeah, there's no way to get around any of this.
Red-handed with the drugs.
It's got to be that way. So I believe there was 4 of them that faced trial. There was actually one guy that flipped, and we'll talk about him because he's kind of the loser in this equation.
You're saying that someone that flipped on the Yakuza ended up not coming out on the positive end?
Yeah, he sowed his own poison. So they take this to trial. The DEA puts their star witness, the undercover, on the stand, and they're questioning about his deal, Takanaka, about the underbosses, what they had going on during this whole entire thing. He's laying out this story truly, wholly, and completely to the point where there just could be zero doubt in any juror's mind. They get up on cross. The defense attorney steps up, and he starts kind of prying into the other businesses that the UC is running while he is trying to get in good with them. Turns out that he was running a couple of protection rackets in Honolulu, and he was going ahead and making some overhead on some innocent U.S. citizens.
Listen, what he was doing is establishing a history of criminal activity within the city to establish legitimacy. There's no way this guy was corrupt, right?
Well, so there's this whole kind of weird tie-in to Michael Jackson in a tour. There's a sumo wrestler that gets involved. We'll talk about the Yakuza and sumo wrestling towards the end of this. There's a little bit of Japanese wrestling that's also going on at the same time that's all kind of embroiled in this case. It turns out that this undercover is pretty dirty, and that is a pretty bad look in the juror's eyes.
It is, but it doesn't change the fact that there was still an agreement. So get to it. How many years did this guy do?
He ends up doing none, and it is thanks to the height defense. So in Japanese, there are 2 different understandings of the term height. Height can either mean yes, or it can mean I understand. And in proper Japanese conversation, just as we would say yes to kind of signify that you're listening, height would mean I understand. Mm-hmm. So the defense that was put
up... I just said height. Sorry. I just said height.
Exactly.
Hi.
That had to have been it, like the emphasis that you say it.
Is that what she's saying in 40-Year-Old Virgin?
Hi.
No. Where it's the one that is just like, hi. Oh, no, that's not it. That's in Saving Sarah Marshall, where he's sleeping with all the chicks after Sarah Marshall.
And
she just keeps saying hi, and he's like, can you please stop saying that?
Yeah.
She's just saying, I understand.
I understand the plowing you're giving me. So this defense kind of puts the court in this stunned silence where they're trying to figure out how there's no plausible deniability that this could have been a height that you understand, and reasonable doubt creeps into these jurors' minds.
The only person that can tell you for sure what they meant by that high, if they meant yes or I understand, is the guy that's on trial. And of course, he's going to be like, oh, I definitely just said I understand. I wasn't going to make that deal. I was just letting him know I understood what he said.
What good would I have with rocket launchers? Where would I even get the rockets?
I was shocked that he was trying to show me this kind of stuff. I just told him I understand. I was threatened.
I was scared, actually. Yeah. That's more guns than I've ever seen before in my life. So the jury goes ahead and acquits Takenaka and three of his underbosses. The guy that tried to turn state's evidence and roll on the Yakuza ends up taking a plea deal to give the information that he knew. And in taking the plea deal, he ends up pleading guilty. So he's actually the only one that goes to prison because
he is probably they had to send him back to like the States, like the actual.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, the trial, I believe, took place in Hawaii.
I know, but they would have to, because there's such a presence there that the Yakuza had in Hawaii that like putting him anywhere within the, jail system or prison system, he'd be dead so quickly.
Also, if I rolled on the Yakuza, the last thing I would ever want to do is be taken back to Japan.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, you're a marked man at that point in time. So they get away scot-free. I'm sure there was a lesson learned. Of course, all of the meth was seized and the heroin was seized, but at the same time, who gives a shit? You can just get more of it. We come to Susumu Ishii, not Tomohiro Ishii, Susumu Ishii. He was made
not part of the Ichikai. Ishii,
yes. He was made the second Kaicho of the Inagawa Kai gang that had the
Iwagawa Kai.
I thought it was Inagawa Kai.
Iwakawa, IWA.
They were the ones that brokered the peace deal with the Yamaguchi Gumi.
The Yamaguchi Gucci. It only took an hour and 35 minutes to fall apart for pronunciation.
Yeah, I think we still got some more. This dude was big business. He was released from prison in 1984, and he began purchasing real estate like crazy at the start of what was known as Japan's bubble economy. At this point in time, Japan had the largest stock exchange in the world.
Yeah, so late 80s are the Yakuza's heyday. It's it's when they start making their modern nut. Tokyo Stock Exchange. It becomes the largest. I don't know if it's like, when they say largest, I don't know if that means the amount of money moving through it or being traded, or just the largest in general, because it took the place of the New York Stock Exchange for the largest.
Yeah.
The real estate and stock market, construction and entertainment are all these businesses that the Yakuza are like, we can definitely insert ourselves in though. We already know the entertainment side. We can handle that.
Yeah.
We've been running this shit with the fucking sex trafficking and all that stuff. We already do the construction thing. That's something we've been doing for a while.
A lot of money there.
But with our ability to essentially probably muscle out people from these properties and things like that, and then turn around and sell them for commercial real estate, make a ton of money. And then also, great, we can go ahead and start investing our money through additional channels into the stock market, which by using all of our resources and all of these companies' information that we can probably glean and have access to, determine what stocks to sell and trade.
Yeah. So he ended up purchasing and owning a 36-hole country club that he charged $200,000 for membership fees. He was making money.
Think if you had that money though, then, and you were like, what country club do you belong to? And he's like, the fucking head of the syndicate. Like, yeah, I'm a member of that club.
Probably an important club to be a part of if you had the money to do it. Yeah. So you're not going to think twice about handing it over. He was known as the world's richest gangster. On his payroll, as one of his advisors, he had a gentleman named Prescott Bush. Prescott Bush was George H.W. Bush's father, who, after this whole uncovering was done, said that he had no idea any of the business dealings that his client was involved in. He was just an advisor. At the same time, he ran these banking deals, these real estate scams. These real estate scams were actually pretty brilliant. So what he would do is he would buy a house in a pretty affluent neighborhood. He would move some of the Koban in there that were maybe a little bit more of the partiers, the loud people. They would end up driving all of their neighbors around them nuts, thus driving the property values down as people were trying to leave. He would then buy up all of the properties around the plant house that he had set up, and he would move them out, thus boosting the real estate investment or the real estate prices back up. Then he'd sell off all of those properties. So he's making money off of a problem that he is creating.
Yeah, exactly. During this time, gambling, women, drugs, they're booming. This is the late 80s. Like even in Japan, like the 80s have reached Japan, like shit's kicking off.
Yeah, they owned the entire red light district. They said it was like 100 square blocks of like arcades, cat houses.
It's where you want to hang out.
Yeah. The funnest parts of town, I'm sure that would have to be the scariest parts of town because the Yakuza ran them.
One thing this guy did was he actually kind of had a like low key kind of life, but he was very into like the finer things. So he was like extravagant, but like privately. So he stayed out of the public eye. By 88, he had amassed $1.6 billion through these real estate deals and all this stuff, trying to stay kind of in the shadows. Fucking $1.6 billion for this Yakuza syndicate leader, and not even the largest syndicate either.
He ends up pulling off. This guy manipulated the largest stock exchange in the world. What he did is he went to the two largest investment firms in Japan. He secured a $200 million loan out of both of these places. Then goes ahead and buys up 27 million shares of the Tokyo Corporation, which was the Tokyo Express Electric Railway, which is a big business in Japan. He ended up turning that $200 million purchase into almost $2 billion from that single investment.
Yeah.
Just making money hand over fist.
Well, and I'm not sure if it's taken place in the 80s or it comes into the 90s, but you're going to get some actual, just like very blatant intimidation of like corporate boards of directors, like during like meetings and shit. But kind of stepping back over to Ishii. At one point, they tracked down that he gave $360,000 to Noriega.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that.
Not sure remotely why, but at that point, I mean, he only had, and again, this isn't a huge operation. This is the Iragawa, right? So it's not as big as the other one, but he still has, I think, like 7,500 guys like under his control.
How many guys do you need when you have money making money for you? Like what they're bringing in is tiddlywinks compared to what you're pulling off of investments.
Well, what usually happens with bubbles?
They burst. And if they're being propped up by a bunch of bad loans that are being sent out to Yakuza members and people that are manipulating the stock market and businesses that are overextending themselves during the good times, the bubble pops.
And this is in an era when there's journalism and all that kind of stuff has records and they're able to track stuff back. When this 90s financial crisis happens, Ishii's like, I can't deal with this shit. He actually retires in 1990 and dies a year later. So doesn't even get to enjoy retirement, but still $1.6 billion. He
got out before it popped. I believe the pop happened in 1991.
Yeah, but he dies a year later, so it's completely pointless. He couldn't spend that money in a year if he tried. The Yakuza lose big during this, all, like you said, the bad loans and everything like that. Just even the public perception of the fact that they were involved in this kind of stuff and may have, had a pretty significant contribution to it, turns public opinion completely against them. March 1st, 1992, even the government's like, okay, we need to, public opinion swaying against them enough. We need to step in and actually do something about this. An anti-gang law is passed basically calling out the Yamaguchi-gumi as a social evil. And this is the first time that the Japanese government has ever come out openly like this and taken this position.
This is where things, to me, still sniff of corruption, which it's always going to be that way. So during this 1992 anti-violence group legislation, it, like you were talking about, it gives police expanded powers to crack down on the Yakuza. Members were required to report all of their affiliations to the police. So they had created this database, which the Yamaguchi Gumi and the Iragawa Kai line up. They go in, they have all of their foot soldiers and everything report to the police. Now, this seems to me like, you're trying to be forward facing, you're trying to do the right thing.
What are you doing?
What they are doing is anytime they run afoul of the police, they have information on crimes that these other syndicates are committing that they're going ahead and passing along. And in doing so, they are getting tipped off about their raids that are happening at their places. And they're nice enough in some of these raids to when they get tipped off, they'll still leave guns behind so the police can have
Take
a win.
pictures and show like, we stopped an armed shipment.
Yeah, this is the governor and Super Troopers when they're taking a picture of the weed and he grabs a shotgun and he cocks it for the picture op. Like they're still throwing the police a bone.
Well, and what this does is on paper, this decreases Yakuza activity because to be openly Yakuza is essentially part of this social evil. It's, against the law as far as this anti-gang and anti-violence law goes. All they do is they just change the name to associates. So now the Koban aren't like the foot soldiers anymore. Now they're just associates and they're part of these organizations. It basically just serves to drive them underground. Basically, it says this: hey, we can't operate out in the open anymore. You think we're going to fucking stop operating? Do you think that the money just stops and the fucking funnels for all of these markets that we have just dry up? No, we're just not going to be so open. You're not going to find out about it anymore.
I think there still was a pretty sharp decline because and there's something that the old bosses talk about where the new gangsters lose the plot. There's no real honor in what they're doing anymore. And this falls along the lines of increased sex trafficking. They start dipping their pool into child pornography, some very just pure evil shit. That's absolutely terrible. That these old heads that have retired or that out of the gang are coming out and saying, if this would have happened in our era, they just would have killed you. Like they wouldn't even have kicked you out of the group. They just would have killed you.
Yeah.
It would have cost your life to be exploiting children and these other people.
What used to be like you have the scales of justice.
Uh-huh.
What used to be kind of an equal thing between public perception and maybe just trying to keep this perception of honor, or maybe even to trick themselves into still being honorable, and the money, that kind of stayed. It never fluctuated too much. No. And it now gets to the point when you have these younger generations, the new age Yakuza coming up, you basically don't have people that are carrying on what they consider the traditions to actually replace them. You have these members that are aging out that the people behind them are completely different, are so different for what they're going to prioritize. The ones that do end up replacing them tend to gear toward a little bit more of the violent side because they're, again, making more of those like sex trafficking, fucking all that kind of stuff, child pornography. They're making that they're adding more of it in, and it's becoming more of a money-making opportunity for them. You also get ones that are less obedient. They don't care about the tradition. Like I said, loyalty and honor are less of a priority for them. And the bosses that were these strong presences that actually maintain this structure, as soon as they're out the door, the rank and file, it's like a substitute teacher. The rank and file just become just much harder to handle. And I think what also adds into it is the quality of the pool that you're able to actually pull from. There was a time like especially during the boom in like the 50s and the 60s, when you're getting all these people coming back, these soldiers that don't have anywhere to go. And so they're getting involved in this life and they're in it for life. Mm-hmm. There weren't a lot of options. It's just like entertainment. Like, do you know how many shows, like different shows we watch? Like we watch really the same show probably.
Yeah.
There's just so many options. Nowadays, there's so many other options that don't involve you taking such a risk as joining the Yakuza and having to pledge your full allegiance above your family and do all that kind of stuff. People aren't going to take that chance. So the people that are willing to actually take that life are going to be lower quality. And so you're not going to have the same type of like leadership that you used to have.
When you're trying to pull new recruits out of high schools, junior highs, you're starting to aim for a younger audience. It's not the same as getting a hold of an orphan that's going to be grateful for you extending family and friendship to them.
Yeah.
These people are coming from a different background where I don't want to use the word appreciation, but it kind of feels right to say they don't have an appreciation for what the Yakuza is giving them, because the Yakuza is going to take more than they will ever give
There aren't
these
those
guys.
people that still remember those old traditions. There's too much of a gap there.
Yeah, and when you start to lose kind of the core tenets and everything like that, which we saw pretty much everything, I'm sure, including fucking each other's wives, get blown out of this Yakuza code.
Just two old heads sitting there talking. Do you remember back in our day
when a man's wife, when marriage meant something to these animals,
these fucking punks? During the 90s, this is also the time when they're going international. They've always kind of had hands in trying to do that, but this is kind of when, because of these anti-gang laws, they're now kind of branching out and making that more of a priority. You get, of course, the trafficking of women all over Asia, offers to bring them in for like stable career and all that kind of stuff. They end up getting drugged and turned into sex slaves. You get the good old meth trafficking. They'd had a lot of experience with that. You gotta stick with what works. But we're gonna diversify a little bit. So we're gonna get the heroin from Southeast Asia. And we're kind of curious about this stuff, cocaine. So we end up getting in touch with the Cali cartel in the 90s. And I believe that they end up even having a meeting between members of the Cali cartel, representation of the Cali cartel, and also members of the Yamaguchi Gumi.
This is post Escobar. This is post Medellin cartel.
Yeah.
This is the Cali cartel coming out on top, running all of Colombia, basically.
Yeah, and this ended up not materializing into anything. They had this meeting. They thought the meeting went well, but I guess that the Cali cartel had other priorities and everything. You'd think, though, trying to get into the Asian market or into the Japanese market, which at that point would then be distributed across Asia, probably would be fucking huge for them.
It also comes down to a numbers game.
Yeah, exactly.
Us talking drug economics is funny, but it is a numbers game. If it's cheaper,
you only have so much supply and people that are already paying for it.
Yeah, and if it's cheaper to mule your shit up into the United States where there's already an established market.
Yeah, you're not shipping all the way across the ocean.
Exactly. It's going to be a little bit different.
The Russians come knocking, though. They're like, hey, we'd like to work together. So in exchange, the Russians would get all of these, because, again, Japan, number 3 economic power in the world. They're manufacturing all this crazy, awesome shit. So the Russians end up getting stolen cars and consumer goods. Levi jeans, we all love them, right? Reebok, sweet. The Yakuza get all of the guns and women shipped in from Russia and all of the Eastern Bloc and everything like that.
We make you a good deal. You do not have to go to Hawaii to buy rocket launcher. We have 10 rocket launchers coming over
so
right
many
now.
rocket launcher. We have so many rocket launcher coming out my ears. But yeah, I mean, you are going to have this insane surplus, especially in the fucking like 90s, of all this Soviet era weaponry. So they're basically just like, we'll give you guns and also more women for you to fucking sex traffic. These ones are fucking blonde and look way different than you. They'll get so much money. It's fucking disgusting.
We're also talking about a situation where these ultra-nationalist ties seem to be falling away, because after the United States went in or I guess during the occupation of the United States and Japan, you also had Russia sneaking in after World War II was done and taking some of those northern islands.
Yeah.
So governmentally, Japan, not a fan of Russia.
Not good bedfellows.
Yakuza, though, seem to look past that ultra-nationalism and see an opportunity.
They end up making deals with a lot of these other, like with the Italian mob, like in the United States and everything. And it's weird how they kind of like work together and like what they take care of. The Yakuza, of course, they already have a presence in Hawaii, like we just discussed. They jump over to Los Angeles. They make their way across to New York. The Mafia and the Yakuza end up collaborating when it comes to like gambling. So basically, when the gambling is such a thing, so when you have like all of these Asian tourists and stuff coming in, basically the Yakuza would get a cut because they would be funneling and have these connections with the Italian mob, and they'd be like, no, we have these gambling places you can come play.
They're barkers at a comedy show.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And this is also kind of the deal I believe that they have with the Russians as well, is like people that are coming in will gamble and everything. They'll lead them to the places where they can do that, and then they'll end up getting a cut off the top.
New York Police Department hilariously thinks, well, there's no way that the American mob is going to let the Yakuza come in and step on their soil. This will take care of itself. This will probably end up a little bit bloody, so it'll be okay.
It's just a phase.
And then all of a sudden they look over and they see 2 Yakuza members walking around with Lucky Luciano, and they're like, oh, shit.
Las Vegas, man.
Yeah.
Who were the fucking biggest whales? The fucking like Japanese businessmen, everything like
Absolutely.
that. You think that that's not a fucking destination for these Yakuza guys? You're fucking dumb.
Yeah, they had a very large presence in Las Vegas. Do you think that they ever tried to make inroads in Omaha? Omaha.
Yeah.
They were over there in Nebraska, and they got there. They're like, what the fuck is this? This is the whitest place we've ever seen. You guys name this Omaha?
Yeah.
They're like, no. Omaha. Oh, okay.
You say that wrong.
In 2008, these anti-Yakuza bills keep getting passed. There's an amendment that allows bosses to be charged for Yakuza-related crimes.
It's like RICO, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to finger these guys. It's
Been doing that for a while now.
It's pretty hard to try to arrest the higher ups when all of these foot soldiers these Koban are out there causing the issues. So
I didn't know my kids were doing that.
Yeah, you can't be held responsible for the sins of the children, but now you can, and this sort of changes the game for the Yakuza, which they have to push underground even further. There were also Yakuza exclusion ordinances that were passed that made it more difficult for them to raise funds and squeeze businesses and citizens for just contracts,
protection rackets, shit like that.
Yeah. And I think that becomes a very big thing because we talked about it a little bit, but there's instances where the Yakuza would be researching Toshiba, for instance. They would see some bad business practices going on at Toshiba. They would buy themselves a position onto the board.
They would just have to buy stock, and they would show up to shareholder meetings. That's how they got their access. You could have one share, and you get to come out and speak at a shareholder meeting.
And then all of a sudden they're showing up and threatening to release these terrible secrets that are going to really hurt the company. And the companies are looking at this situation like, well, shit, what do we do here? This isn't...
During a fucking shareholder meeting.
So what's this guy's minimum price? And they hear the minimum price and they think, well, that's going to actually cost less than what it would cost legal to take care of this issue on their own. So let's just pay the guy off. The other thing that I forgot to mention that might have been one of the funniest rackets they did, this was a while back, is they would take a prostitute, they would have him go out and pick up, or have her go out and pick up a John, maybe him, who knows? Yeah. When they would bring the John home back to their place, they would have a Yakuza member act as their husband.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as the husband would run into the John, he would start threatening him.
Just shake him down.
Shake him down for money. If this dude already had a wife or a husband.
Look for the ring.
Yeah.
We're going to tell your family we want more.
We're going to ruin everything. So they were just fishing with these prostitutes, which I'm sure weren't getting paid their true market value, as they probably still don't now.
Yeah. But, Japanese sex work, it was not willing thing probably back at this time.
No, they're just these phishing scams that are just running amok among the public. And granted, if you're out there making that happen, you have a wife at home, you probably deserve
they still
a little
do
bit
that.
of
I'll get to that in a second.
Yep. But as the Yakuza start to lose power in these private sectors and they're not allowed to go shake up business board meetings.
You can't have a bank account. Because if you're on the list and everything, like you're not allowed to get a bank account.
Did some crazy shit though, because they end up all of the credit card services are basically said if you have any Yakuza funded businesses, sex shops, cat houses, anything like that, you're not allowed to use a credit card. Which the fact that you can use a credit card at a sex dungeon is
don't fucking judge.
It just seems crazy to be buying that on credit. It seems like it should just be a cash business. The Yakuza actually created their own third party creditor. And instead of the bank fees being like 5% for a transaction, it would be 15% for a transaction. The Yakuza would keep their cut and they would let these creditors have what was left of that cut. So they're still figuring out a way to skirt the system. There was a point in time where if you disassociated yourself from the Yakuza, you couldn't have a bank account for like 5 years. And even trying to go into another job,
how many of those guys do you think needed a bank account? We're like, no, I'm not Yakuza anymore, and they got the bank account. They're like, I'm really Yakuza again.
Exactly.
But I got the account.
If you were somehow able to get a job or land a job, which I'm sure was probably pretty tough as soon as they caught just even a whiff of your tattoos. Or they looked at your left hand and they saw that you didn't have a pinky. They know that you're already unreliable because you've lost a full digit.
Yeah, but at the same time, remember, like, getting out of the Yakuza to go work those normal jobs is kind of like a rarity because getting out was
But we're talking about a
see.
later time when
Yeah.
this loyalty thing wasn't quite as big of a deal. So I'm sure there was a little bit of movement there. After these ordinances hit, these numbers really start greatly shifting, as Chris was talking about, from members to associates. At one point in time in 2010, they were said to have had 78,600 members and associates. By 2010 or by 2020, it was reported that they were down to 25,900. And again, this is just reporting numbers. This isn't the underground guys. This isn't anything else that's going on. We've done a lot of bad talking about the Yakuza. I think we got to get into some of their good works. Like I say,
Their philanthropic ventures.
Exactly, yeah. 1995, Kobe earthquake hits. Again, this is Yamaguchi-gumi territory. This is where it was founded. Those docks are what built the largest entity of the Yakuza. The Yamaguchi-gumi gang mobilized so much faster than the Japanese government response. Yeah. They provided disaster relief services. Again, they were opening up their private buildings to people that were affected by this earthquake.
Joel Osteen doesn't do that shit.
Nope.
And you get the fucking Japanese mafia doing it.
Yeah, Osteen's got plumbers that are breaking into walls and finding hundreds of thousands of dollars that dumb bastard is squirreled away into the walls. And these guys are, again, they had locked rooms. I'm sure they had rooms that were full of cash, just like Joel Osteen did.
Plastic on the floor. Yeah.
But at the same time, when the public looks at this and they sees that was Japanese talk. They see the government response and how slow it is to roll out. It's very tough to explain to somebody that's affected by a disaster that there's things that you have to go through in order to mobilize a response for the government to get your stuff out there.
Like they roll into town and they're just like getting ready to hand out supplies and everyone's got shit. And they're like, what the, did we come through earlier? And they're like, no, it was the Yakuza.
Yeah. And you got to think that that's not a great look for the government. But at the same time, and again, we talked about this in warm up, the Yakuza can do good things. And
you can do good things and bad things. They're not mutually exclusive. It just, one does not like, it's not a barter system where you're just like, well, did they do enough good things to over? No. But you can talk about the good things and just like mention, oh, they also did this. They can be horrible people, but they can still do good things.
And there has to be an understanding within the general public that just because they did a good thing doesn't mean their organization has turned a new leaf.
Yeah, exactly. There's something to it.
Yeah. This is the calm between the storms after the disasters. So it was the Tonoku earthquake and tsunami that hit in 2011. Immediately, again, the Yakuza are sending hundreds of trucks with food, water, blankets, any sort of aid to these people in the affected areas faster than the Japanese government. They've even gone a step further in the other affected countries that were outside of Japan. They were offering aid to them too. I'm sure it was probably to be like, you guys got to get your meth racket running pretty fast again so we can keep getting this ice out onto the streets.
Well, do you know what helps rebuilding?
Meth.
People that can work for 24 hours a day. Get stuff done twice as fast.
So they're still pulling off these good works. It's obviously self-serving. I want to believe that there's a little bit.
Still is a strong word.
Yeah, I want to believe that there's
a couple humanitarian-ish works.
There's probably a couple people that have okay reasons to be doing this.
They're also still like kind of ultranationalist, traditionally, right? So I mean, that's the whole thing, is like helping out and trying to like, we don't follow any of these rules. We got to at least follow like, which one is the one about don't harm the citizens or help? That's rule number 4. Okay, we do the wife fucking thing already. We at least have to try to help somebody.
We still sell drugs. Yeah, we got to keep one of these things alive. Kind of getting back to how they are still active, technically. In 2006, I'm not sure if anybody's an MMA fan, Pride FC, Pride Fighting Championships, one of the biggest organizations for fighting in Japan, end up running into some financial issues after it was revealed that there were ties between the Yakuza and the company. This drastically hurt the business as a whole, but at the same time, it dropped their asking price down so low that the Fertitta brothers that owned the UFC at the time just went ahead and scooped it up for pennies on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole idea was this was going to be a separate organization that would keep all of their management structure and everything in place. They were going to run events under the Pride banner. This never came to existence. It would end up being dissolved. I believe a lot of this was transferred over into the Dream organization. 2011, there were cell phone text messages. This is an issue. It's not a self-inflicted wound. This is a wound inflicted by technology. Because I'm sure this was going on for so long before this. But 2011, there are cell phone text messages that were uncovered that indicated there was a number of sumo matches that had been fixed by the Yakuza. No! The most honor sport that there is.
Go back, listen to that episode.
Yes. 14 wrestlers and a few of the stable masters were kind of implicated in this plot. There were a couple of them that actually did fess up to what they did. There was one guy that fought to clear his name for years in court. This happening in 2011. I thought you were
going to say he got to fight to clear his name by doing sumo wrestling.
That was how he earned his way back in.
It's like trial by combat.
So the March 2011 Basho, the tournament, gets canceled for them to continue to investigate this. This is the first time that a Basho has been canceled since 1946. And I'm sure it was probably because there was a few things going on in 1946 in Japan that caused this to cancel. All of the wrestlers that were implicated in this plot were forced to retire immediately. Not a good look to have to retire based upon these means. Like I say,
your whole life is dedicated to that.
In a sport that if the referee made a bad call, he used to commit seppuku to atone for that sin of making a bad call in a sumo match. These guys were taking bribes to throw matches for the Yakuza.
Hi.
And again, we're talking 2006, 2011. Much more current times. In 2021, there was a Yakuza syndicate leader named Takeshi Ibisawa. 60-year-old man. He was arrested for attempting to traffic uranium and weapons-grade plutonium from Myanmar to somebody who he believed was an Iranian general that turned out to be an undercover DEA agent. Just let that set in. 2021, this guy has his hands on uranium and weapons-grade plutonium as a syndicate leader in Myanmar for the Yakuza.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't governments trading this shit back and forth. This is still an underground organization that is said to dwindle pretty greatly, is trying to trade weapons-grade plutonium. Along with that, he was also charged with attempting to distribute drugs in the United States. That had to be pretty common practice when he caught one of these guys. That's what they were doing. He was also trying to purchase American-made surface-to-air missiles.
As one does.
Which I'm sure was just another piece in a trade that he was trying to make with another DEA agent.
Buddy, if you're buying weapons-grade plutonium and stuff, surface-to-air missiles are pretty innocuous as far as that goes. You're just kind of like, that's like going in and like being like, oh, I see a pack of gum or something like that by the register. You're just like, oh, are those surface-to-air missiles? Can I'll take a couple of those.
How do you think that they would facilitate the logistics on that? Like, does that just go in a shipping container and put on a boat?
No, I mean, if that's 2021, that's talking like the ones like shoulder-mounted probably.
Oh, okay. So not large missiles.
Probably not. You're thinking like
launch systems.
You're thinking like on the trailer launching it. Like you're thinking Cuban Missile Crisis shit. Yeah. They've gotten smaller since then. Yeah,
that makes more
technology.
Shockingly enough, Takeshi goes ahead and pleads guilty. In this year, I believe it was like January 9th, he pled guilty to a 20-year maximum sentence for trying to trade weapons-grade plutonium, uranium, trying to buy surface-to-air missiles. That's what we give that guy, 20 years in prison. Max, yeah.
That means that like he'll be out earlier. What's funny is on the complete flip side of that, like this type of like crazy shit, you have even the stuff they're doing today to make money, and is one of their biggest money makers is like old people scams, phone calls. They're calling in pretending to be their kids, or they'll come into like nursing homes and they'll pretend to be like someone from their insurance agency to get them to sign over like policies and stuff like that. They make a ton of money cheating your nana out of her money. They have lobbying groups. They just work within the political sphere that lobby on behalf of them for their interests and things like that. More than 50 plus companies have had confirmed ties to organized crime there.
Big ones, too.
Yeah.
Not just little guys.
Yep. And I mean, they're still active all over. It's just that, especially because nowadays you don't need as big of a district. You don't have to have a guy on every corner to make sure everything's being enforced. You don't have to have all of these vendors and all these other people. You don't have to have all of these like foot soldiers that are only serving to draw attention to you. Keep your operations small and tight. And not only that, but if you're still raking in all of this money and you're reducing the pool of people you have to split it between, Jesus, you're making so much more.
Yeah. Just like they were victims of technology and the text message scandal with the sumo stuff, you also have a situation where if you're doing your scams electronically now, you're not allowed to have a bank account in Tokyo. It doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have a bank account in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland or anywhere like that.
Yeah, there are so many different ways around that stuff.
Your money's being shifted to so many other places, but at the same time, selling meth on the street is going to be 5% of your business when you're making so much money on these technological scams, when you're creating a fake AI to send to people, just all sorts of different stuff. It's
diversified. You're not having to just target like an audience in your specific area. You're branching out. Now it's everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, still very active and apparently very successful.
And this is a situation where I feel like when we do organized crime episodes, I think that I kind of fall more on the side of things as far as they go. I don't think the Yakuza will ever be snuffed out. I personally don't really think that they should ever be. Again, sex trafficking, I want them to stop. Child pornography, I could
see them leave, having already done that, and then maybe something else like some other people take their place that don't have a history of that.
Yeah. There's just one of these things where it's kind of like for good to be in the world, there has to be evil.
Yeah, I guess.
There has to be a balance of power.
You have to see the other side of society. If you have the extremes of the positive parts of society, you do have to have that balance of those negative parts. Because there are going to be people with vices and people that want shit. And again, there's got to be a market for it.
Yeah, there's also the fact that crime sometimes eliminates crime, because if you're in a city,
when it's more controlled.
Yeah, if you're in the red light districts,
it's such a ridiculous concept, but yeah, it's absolutely true. It's the whole concept of like legalizing marijuana in the United States recreationally. Why don't you do that? Like, you realize that it's happening anyway, but you're allowing essentially more drug trafficking to occur when it could be controlled. Exactly. And obviously, it's not a fucking issue.
Well, if you're walking down the street, you need some money real quick, and you're not a member of the Yakuza, there's always going to be the thought in the back of your head, if you go in and rob that Japanese restaurant, there's a good chance the Yakuza might have a hand in it. So if you rob them, they're just going to kill you. It's almost like there's a deterrence of violence that doesn't come from the legal side of things, that you're just like, it's not worth the squeeze.
Yeah. But as of 2024, they state that the Yakuza numbers are about 9,900 members with 8,900 quasi-members. I think that's, again, they can't have the number go up. The number has to always continually be decreasing, even if it's decreasing by a little bit. But I have a feeling that even if those numbers were to be accurate, you have those people that they themselves have such an expanded reach. They have the reach of what it took 10 people to do prior to. So it just means that they're just essentially smaller and harder to catch at this point.
Numbers are still bigger than the mob, but it's peak in America.
That's true. Yeah. All right, man. You got anything else on this one?
It gets me excited to branch out into organized crime. Like we mentioned the triads earlier. I say that this is our push into organized crime, but we've already covered Escobar. We've already covered Pineapple Face. It's just like it's
seeing the different aspects and the different cultural ways that organized crime happens. I'm looking forward to finding out kind of what the organized crime is within like fucking Great Britain.
Oh yeah.
Talk about the IRA, all that kind of stuff. And then also like the Russian mob. So, I mean, we got a lot of stuff to choose from.
Yeah. A lot of mob stuff.
A lot of mobs.
Sure. Hey, more diamond robbery.
That's true. Yeah, as well. There's so much more crime. We're not turning into a crime podcast. It's just history. So it's fun to talk about this shit.
Yep.
But hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at Historically High. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.